Hey, welcome back, everybody. We're going to get started in the next lesson. We are on Module 2, Lesson 3. So we're going to jump right into this and get this done as quick as possible. And then I will tell you about the assignments at the end of these notes. So we're still talking about ecosystems, environmental health, and interactions. This time around, we're going to be looking at Module 2, Lesson 3, which is going to focus on human impacts of in the environment. So here's a few of the learning objectives that we're going to have this week. And again, our focus is going to be on human impact on the environment, and we'll get jumping right into it. We'll start with a few slides of a review, and then we'll go right into the new stuff. Okay? So as an introduction, humans can cause damage to the Earth's ecosystem because of all the organisms in the ecosystem and how they're interdependent on one another. Toxic chemicals and other human activities can actually harm the entire ecosystem. And we talked about how important biodiversity is. So if we start damaging an ecosystem that affects the biodiversity, and remember the biodiversity is the variety of organisms in a geographic area, it actually damages the overall health of the ecosystem. So human intervention represents the main threat to biodiversity in the following ways. Habitat destruction, and we'll talk about that as we go through these notes. Overexploitation, if we're killing many species faster than they can reproduce, if we're overhunting, overfishing certain areas. Introduction of invasive species. A lot of times this happens on an accidental basis. We don't mean to move or transport an invasive species. Think about like the zebra mussels. You see signs all the time at Lake Mead and stuff that talks about, watch out for hitchhikers, and it talks about zebra mussels that can be transported on the bottom of your boat from one location to the next. Overpopulation, human overpopulation. And then we'll talk a little bit about climate change as well. And we'll give some examples towards the end. Humans can take the following measures to help save it. We can try to reduce air pollution, water pollution, soil pollution, all the different types of pollution, right? Protect the habitat from habitats of animals, especially endangered or threatened species of animals. We can protect animals from excessive fishing and hunting, and a worldwide participation and education in the importance of biodiversity. So here's our review. Biodiversity ecosystems tend to stay stable when they're confronted with changing conditions. However, if the conditions change too much, the ecosystems can be impacted in the following ways. And this comes straight from the last set of notes, right? Organism types could change. The types of organisms within the ecosystems may change if we change the ecosystem itself. The population numbers could change. We could have a reduction or even an increase in certain populations of organisms. Extinction. We could have species that no longer exist because they don't have a way to get out of that situation and they end up dying off. You could have migration, either immigration or emigration, different organisms coming in or the organisms in that ecosystem leaving. And you could have speciation, right? A new species because of new selective pressures, natural selection pressures that might be on it because of this change in the ecosystem could cause species to actually evolve. So it's important for the health of an ecosystem that biodiversity is protected because it helps the ecosystem survive a wider range of changing conditions. So let's move into what we are going to be talking about. This is the new stuff, right? All right, so from a human point of view, a habitat is basically where you live. It's kind of where you're staying at, where you go to school, where you might go to have fun. Your habitat can be altered and you can easily adapt. We've seen this recently, right? We have this COVID thing going on and people are saying, the habitats change, right? We have this new microbe that could actually cause us to get sick. So people have had to adapt and now they have to wear face masks when they go to the store and things like that, or social distance. So most people are able to adapt. Most people live in a few different places and go to a number of different schools throughout their life, and they can adapt to those situations. A plant or an animal may not be able to adapt as fast, right? So a habitat is a natural home or environment of an organism. And if we change that habitat, if humans destroy the habitats, then the habitats of other organisms, and those organisms can't adapt and they can't move out, then it could actually lead to the species going extinct. Once a species goes extinct, it can never be recovered. In some ways, humans cause habitat destruction would be clearing land to make farms or urban sprawl. We could inadvertently or on purpose introduce non-native species or plants, overhunt, overharvest organisms that are in a particular environment, and those type of things. So we'll look at a few of those and get some examples as we go through the notes. So what can lead to land loss? Let's look at this first. Clearing land for agriculture and development is a major cause of habitat destruction. Within the past 100 years, the amount of total land used for agriculture has almost doubled, and land used for grazing cattle has more than doubled. Agriculture alone has cost the United States half of its wetlands and almost all of its tall grass prairies. Prior, when people were just starting to move from the East Coast towards the West Coast, in the past, we had these huge prairies, right, with tons of bison and other animals and different plants and stuff like that had this entire giant ecosystem. And now it's nearly all gone. So native prairie ecosystems with their fertile soils, deep-rooted grasses, diversity of colorful flowers, burrowing prairie dogs, and herds of bison and other animals have virtually disappeared. Urban development is another thing that can basically increase the amount of land lost as new places are being built over existing ecosystems. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And another one that people don't usually think about, it's not in the notes, is actually roads. And the interesting thing about that is you think, oh, roads just a narrow strip of land, right? It's not going to do that much harm. But if you have a big wide area and you put a road through it, you've basically cut the ecosystem in half. And then if you put another road through it, now you've cut it into quarters. So we're kind of dividing up the land mass with these roads. And there's some organisms, if they try to cross the road, they're going to become roadkill. Other habitats that are being rapidly destroyed are forests. This is especially in the tropical forests. And one of the biggest problems is something called slash and burn agriculture. What this is it's when the people turn the forest into a farm, what they do is they cut down all the trees and then they just kind of burn it. And then those carbon compounds from the wood that they burn actually gets added to the soil. And it sounds great. You go, oh, we've got nutrients in the soil now. And it does make the soil rather fertile, but only for a short period of time, right? And this technique is used by over 200 million people. And what happens is, as a consequence of the slash and burn agriculture, even though the nutrients are added to the soil, they're quickly lost from the soil, because what happens is the people then harvest the crop because the nutrients in the soil are brought back up into whatever they plant, and then that crop's harvest and they use it, and those soils or those nutrients are removed from the soil. And usually within a few years, the people then abandon that land, they go to another part of the forest and they start the process all over again. What happens is then the topsoil erodes and something called desertification occurs. And this is basically where the forest is turned into desert. Half the Earth's mature tropical forests are gone. And at the current rate of deforestation, all tropical forests will be gone by 2090. That's an estimate, of course. All right, let's move on to non-native species. One of the main causes of extinction is the introduction of non-native species, or exotic species, sometimes they're called. These exotic and new species can basically outcompete the organisms that are already there. So these non-native species, being new to the area, they may not have many natural predators in this new habitat, which allows their population to increase rapidly. And then the invasive species basically outcompetes the native species for resources. Some of these invasive species are so successful at living in certain habitat that the native species then go extinct. Invasive species can disrupt food chains. Sometimes they carry disease with them. Sometimes they prey directly on the native species that are there, or they outcompete them. All of these can have detrimental effects to the ecosystem and can lead to extinction of the native species. A couple examples of this would be the zebra mussel that I mentioned earlier, but there's several others. There's tons of different non-native species. You can look it up on the internet and you can find literally hundreds and hundreds of examples. All right, we also have human overpopulation and how that affects habitat. I added a video link that I show almost every year. It's pretty interesting. It's not very long, 4 or 5 minute clip, I think. but I put it on the canvas in the same spot that this slide is, or pretty close to where this slide would be. And I encourage you to look at that. It's a pretty fascinating video. It graphically kind of shows how fast the human population is growing, especially recently. So I'll just kind of give you the Cliff Note version here as we go through it, but I encourage you to watch that video. The human population has passed 7 billion mark in October of 2011. That was 9 years ago. It will pass 8 to 9 billion probably before the middle of the century. That would be 2050. We're not too far off of that. And some scientists actually have this as high as 10 or 12 billion. All of these people will need resources such as places to live, food to eat, water to drink. They'll have to have some kind of energy source. They'll be creating waste. Essentially, human population growth can affect all other causes of extinction. More people also means more clearing of land for agriculture and development because they'll have to grow more food. They'll be putting in new cities, new towns, new roads. And recall, development by humans often cause habitats to be destroyed, as we saw in the previous slides. This destruction can force species to go extinct or move elsewhere. All right, let's move on to pollution real quick. Pollution adds chemicals, noise, heat, or even light to an environment. This can have many different harmful effects on all kinds of organisms. The best example, or a common example, is the pesticide DDT. The peregrine falcons almost went extinct because of this. Back in the 70s, this pesticide was basically used on all kinds of farms and stuff like that. And then they started noticing that the numbers of these falcons being hatched dropped dramatically. So fewer falcon eggs were surviving. The populations of these falcons declined rapidly, and they eventually discovered that DDT was causing their eggshells to basically be too thin. They quickly banned DDT in the United States, and the falcon populations have recovered. But it was nearly too late. It was actually a pretty big deal at the time. We also have water pollution. Water pollution threatens vital freshwater and marine resources. One of the things, the peregrine falcon, for example, that we talked about on the previous slide, you can think of those as ecological indicators. When we saw that happening, we knew something was wrong with the environment. The same is true with water ecosystems. Usually the ecological indicator that we use in water ecosystems would be amphibians, like frogs. They have very thin skin. So if we start seeing strange things happening to frogs being born with 2 heads or 5 legs, or not being born at all, their numbers decline or something like that, then we usually can tell that there's some kind of pollution going on either in the air or the water or somewhere in that particular area. So a lot of the problems here are industrial and agricultural chemicals, runoff from farms, for example, getting into the rivers and lakes. Waste can be also included in that. Sometimes we have air pollution that can lead to acid rain, which can also threaten water by changing the pH level. As water is essential for all ecosystems, water pollution can result in the extinction of species. We also have soil contamination, which can result in extinction. Soil contamination can come from toxic industrial and municipal waste, different things from irrigation or pesticides from agriculture can all be contaminating the soil. These basically degrade the soil as well, and the soil is the foundation of all terrestrial ecosystems, and that can result in extinction as well. So let's talk about humans and habitat destruction. There's a delicate balance, right, that must be struck when dealing with societal needs for survival and then harm to the environment. There's trade-offs, there's compromises that need to be made in order to ensure that humanity and nature can thrive together. These situations can be super complicated. So here's one of those examples that I mentioned earlier in the notes. One example is the building of Interstate 11 that's supposed to connect Las Vegas to Phoenix. With a more direct route, it would cause an economic boom for both cities, right? It would be a great thing for Phoenix as well as Las Vegas. However, not everybody's happy about the proposal. There's some people that are living in the Avra Valley area that have reservations about this new highway. They're worried about the damaging effects from a highway bypass, such as increased air and water and light pollution, traffic noise, They're concerned about the loss of ancient archaeological sites, urban sprawl, because along that road you're going to have stores and gas stations and those type of things. So that's going to affect different ecosystems as well as the fact that they moved there to have live a nice, peaceful, quiet life. And 47 of the residents, the families from this area, may have to move, or they're going to lose their homes to make room for the highway. So what do we do in that situation? Well, we can either put in the freeway or the highway bypass, or another option would be to improve the current roads that already connect the cities. Since infrastructure like gas station, restaurants, hotels already exist along this route, it would be much less damaging to the environment than building a whole new highway in a new area. So situations like this are never easy to find a solution to, but usually you got to kind of look at both sides of the argument, and it's kind of a cost benefit analysis. You have to look, okay, what's it going to cost us, and what's the benefit, and is there an equal trade-off? Does one outweigh the other? Is it going to cost us too much in organisms going extinct, or is it going to benefit us more than that, and it outweighs that cost that we may have? So when we're doing this, right, what are the factors for finding a solution for something like this? Well, on the environmental side, you have to keep in mind that we have to deal with how we can make sure that biodiversity is maintained. So we got to ask questions like, how would this solution impact the species that reside in the area currently? Or could this destroy habitats that lead to the extinction of species? Are there more environmentally friendly ways to accomplish the same goal? And what are the long-term and short-term impacts on the environment? But at the same time, the societal needs, the factors to keep in mind, are just as important. For example, if we gave up driving cars, that would go a long way to improve the CO2 output in the atmosphere. But it's not realistic, right? It's not a economically viable thing. We still have to move and transport items from one location to the next, where they're manufactured to where they're sold, and those type of things. And it would be unrealistic to ban all cars. So we have to ask questions like, what is the cost for this solution? Is it going to cost us too much, either financially, and we're talking about money costs, but also environmental costs? How can we limit the negative impact on the environment while maximizing the benefit for society? We have to consider both of those, right? It would be great to have this road between Las Vegas and Phoenix, but at what cost, and how can we minimize the negative impact it might have? And then, are there alternative methods for accomplishing the same goal that might lessen the impact? So we have to consider all of these different things, right? And they're all important. One's not necessarily more important than the other. All right, so let's finish off. We'll look at the assignments. Don't forget, you were supposed to do the Module 2, Lesson 2 stuff by Wednesday. We pushed it back a few days just so we can make sure that it gets into quarter 2. And we have started quarter 2, so those things will go in quarter 2. For this week's lesson, Module 2, Lesson 3, make sure you do all the self-checks. Watch all the videos. I think there's a few of them, not counting this one. And then Module 2, 3.4 assignment is the Human Impact on the Environment Science Notebook. You watch those videos and then respond to the writing prompts. And then Module 2, 3.9 is a discussion board on climate change. And Friday, Module 2 test will be open. This ends our Module 2. It's worth 60 points, 10 points for multiple choice. So there's 50 multiple choice, 50 multiple choice, so 50 points for that. And then 10 points for an essay question at the end for a total of 60. It will open up on Friday after we review during the live session. So we'll do another quick review that seemed to help some of you guys last time. And then we will go ahead and open up the test, and you guys will be able to start the test. I will leave that test open until Wednesday next week. So you'll have the rest of the day Friday, Saturday, Sunday if you want to do it over the weekend, or you can do it Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. As long as it's done before midnight on Wednesday, it should be on time. All right, guys, have a great day.